to the Lovelda Show Women of Power podcast, the show where women share their personal power tools, the techniques, strategies, and ways of being which have enabled their business and life success. I am your host, Lovelda Vincenzi, a female speaker, mentor, speaker, and event host on a mission to unleash authentic, powerful female voices onto the world. In today's episode, we'll be uncovering the power tools of Fatou Ndiaye. Fatou's life has always been dedicated to harnessing the collective genius and goodness of the world and to unleash everyone's extraordinary potential to create a better tomorrow. She has spent the last decade in Asia Pacific and recently moved back to Paris to launch her startup, The Great Village. Her startup revolutionizing the world of entrepreneurship by enabling individuals to realize their most daring dreams and become the impact entrepreneurs of tomorrow. Previously, Fatou was the national lead for KPMG, Australia's trade and investment service line focused on assisting Australian SMEs in their international expansion. She designed a digital platform, Go Global, which facilitated the firm's delivery of export-related advisory to SMEs. Prior to this, Fatou spent 4 years in Singapore as the key account manager for a biopharmaceutical company, where she recruited and managed international distributors across APAC, Middle East, and Africa. Today, she shares the secrets which have allowed her to enjoy success in so many areas and sectors despite a challenging start to life. Remember, all the links that are shared in today's show can be found in the show notes, and the only way to ensure that you get your regular fix of this show is to click that subscribe button right now to make sure that you get updates as soon as a new show is added. I think that might be quite enough from me for now. So let's get on with the show. Hey, welcome to another episode. It's the Lovelda Show Women of Power podcast, but you know that already. So I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what episode this is or is going to be, but I'm having so much fun doing these interviews, and this guest is no different. So when you meet somebody and they've just got an interesting past, well, pretty much every guest on my show, but they've got a really interesting dynamic of what they've done and who they've been and where they're at. To look at her, you would not know. I'm going to tell you something about this woman before we even get started. So I asked my guests before they join, tell me a fun but interesting fact about you. And not, I haven't shared very many of them up until now, but this one caught my attention. So travels to 51 countries and has 2 hip replacements, which has got nothing to do with what she does for work, by the way. But I just thought it was an interesting thing to throw out there as a starting point in terms of our discussion today. My guest today, I actually met when I was emceeing an event. Amazing person, just stood out. Somebody you see at the other side of the room and you just think, I need to speak to them. What are they about? We had this amazing, deep conversation in which I get to learn the woman has just lived multiple lifetimes. That's probably the best way of me putting it. There is no other way of me actually saying this. To look at her, she looks like she's 15. She's not. She looks like she's 15. If you're watching on YouTube, she does. You can attest. You can comment and let us know. But she's not, because she's had 4 different businesses in 3 different countries. I lost track. I'm not even going to try to wrap this up because it's too much contained in one person. Welcome to the show, our amazing guest, Fatou Ndiaye.
Yes, perfect. It was not an easy one. Well done.
If you look at the name, it doesn't look like it sounds. It's one of those ones.
No, yeah. But thank you very much for having me, Lovelda. I'm super excited.
So Fatou, I've tried to summarize what you do. I say I've tried. It was really a really poor attempt at trying to summarize what you do because it's so much. Can you share with our guests just a high level overview of your business life to date? Because you've had 3-4 different iterations of what you've done in business.
So if you ask me what I'm doing today, it's pretty easy. It's just one line, is I realize people's dreams. That's it.
See, now you're going to make me look bad.
It's super easy. Come on. No joke. So yes, I did have a few lives before. I used to be the head of trade for one of the large consulting firm. I used to have a business organizing birthday parties. I used to be an export manager for a pharmaceutical company. What else? I used to also work for another company and organizing, creating a platform, like a digital platform to build an ecosystem around exporters. I'm also an expert for the UN in global trade. And I'm also a model.
I mean, the model bit, we could probably have picked that up. But yeah, I mean, you're doing all of these really well. You know, some people tell you they've got all these different bits, but you got to quite senior positions and got a lot of success in each of those roles.
That is correct. And I don't know if it's about being lucky or meeting the right person at the right time, but I think it's a combination of all of those. Plus, I would say having a bit of talent.
I mean, that's a given. You don't kind of get to be a decent model or, you know, and they're so different. It's like modeling, trade, parties, like they're just so different. And you're like a poster girl for but living your dream in multiple different ways. It's really exciting.
I agree. And I think all those experiences that are so different, like you said, have actually led me to where I am today. So everything I've done in the past was all about following a dream. It's having a crazy dream, like I want to travel the world. Oh, how about working for a pharmaceutical company and become the export manager? So they send you around, pay you flight tickets to go to other countries. Done, that's check, you know? Or, oh, I'd love to get new clothes for free. How about becoming a model? So it always starts with a crazy dream that have absolutely no link with each other. But today, my life is really about realizing other people's dreams, because I really feel that it's super important to be fulfilled, to be happy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't live their real life. They just live the life that the norm or society is putting on them, but it's not their real them. And I feel like I have this mission to help other people discover who they really are, because when they do, they will be able to give the best to the world and the best to their communities.
I mean, I've got a question for you, which is kind of a bit off piece, but I want to dive into it. It's a little bit off piece, but it's not. The reason I want to ask is I know of a lot of people who are multi-talented and multifaceted, or they're starting lots of businesses at the same time. And, you know, the advice is you can't do all of it, girl. You can't do all of it. You need to pick something and focus on it. What do you think made you different in terms of being able to have success in all of those different sectors?
I think it's the freedom. I gave myself that freedom in my head, not having to follow rules, because that's a rule, right? Mm-hmm. Don't do multiple things at the same time. It's a rule, it's a norm. But who said it was a rule? Who created that rule? It definitely wasn't me. So how about I do my own rule, which is what fits with me and my personality. So I love multitasking because it gives me that space for creativity. When I learn something in one field, sometimes I'm able to use it in another field, which is completely different. Mm-hmm. But by having those two experiences at the same time, one is nourishing the other one. So I think it's about just being you, having the freedom to be you and do what feels good within yourself and follow your own intuition, which I think is really important. Sometimes you fail, but fail is part of the learning, right?
Okay, I'm gonna have to pick you up on the fail piece. Look, people are gonna be watching now, like, this woman is like a freaking superwoman genius. Everything she touches turns to gold. It's like, ta-da! Like, I mean, seriously. Have you had moments where it just hasn't kind of worked out?
Oh, yes. I've had one big one. When I had my birthday party company in Singapore, I was still developing the business. So I still was on the visitor visa for Singapore, being French. And left the country, went to Malaysia, and was about to go back to Singapore. Like, it was the first time I was doing that, just to get my visa renewed for 3 months, which is a formality, right, being French. And I end up with the custom border agent who was racist, and he decided that I was denied entrance just because he thought I was a prostitute. And he told me in my face, "You're never entering my country again. Go back to your country." And I was just super shocked. Yeah, exactly. I see your face. Yeah, and I had spent 4 years paying taxes in his country, and it was just completely unfair. It was just, didn't like my face. And Singapore has an immigration where they can decide who enters and who doesn't without having to follow any rule. Even if I was French, even if I had spent 4 years in that country. Anyway, so that was a big, big, big fail kind of in my life. And I was able to negotiate to have 2 weeks to go back to Singapore, to pack my bag and leave the country. So I got back to Singapore, started packing and started thinking, what do I do next? I have 2 weeks to redesign my whole life, to decide where to go next. And turns out I had a flight ticket to Sydney, to Australia, booked for holidays 2 weeks later. And I thought, you know what, maybe it's destiny, maybe there's a message there. And I followed my intuition and moved to Sydney. And I ended up 2 years later being the head of trade for one of the largest consulting firms.
Okay, my mouth has just dropped open. So if you're just on the ear side of things, you need to subscribe to this because we're just getting started. And secondly, you need to jump up to YouTube because if you can see some of the faces being presented right now, it's like, what? I mean, wow. I mean, that is not even a small thing. I mean, just that alone would have crushed many people. It might have taken them off on a completely different direction to fight the system or whatever it is. I mean, it's not great. You would think in this day and age that wouldn't be a thing that we'd be facing to that kind of level. And it's unfortunate. It doesn't make all Singaporeans bad. I don't want nobody messaging me. You know, Singapore is a beautiful country. She just happened to bump into somebody that was just not, you know, for whatever reason, had whatever going on. But to come back from that, and then you've had like multiple careers from that. That's incredible.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Like when I got to Sydney, I had no money. I was selling slushies in festivals, and I got like crazy. I was about to leave the country because after 3 months I couldn't find a job, and through a connection, I got actually that first job where I worked for a year and a half before being hunted by a large consulting firm. So I think the big learning there was never give up. And life is about being resilient. We will have lows. Everybody does. But then it's only until you reach the bottom of the swimming pool that you can tap at the end so that you can jump out of the pool. So for me, it was always like that. Every time I reached the lowest part of my life, it always opened to an amazing opportunity. Like, it was not the first example. There were many in my life. And like the first example was when I got my 2 hip replacements. So I was 14.
14? Sorry,
yeah.
Over you. 14?
Yeah, so I have a genetic disorder, a genetic disease that led me to have arthrosis when I was 14. So I ended up being in a rehabilitation center for a year. And you would think that was the worst story ever. So I was on a bed. I couldn't sit down for 6 months. I had to stay lying on a bed. And but then I had like a wheel bed. It's like a wheelchair, but it's a bed. Can you picture it? So I had my wheel bed and I was wheeling around the rehabilitation center. And for me, that was one of the things that made who I am today. So I told you earlier, one word that's really important to me is freedom. Being in that rehabilitation center gave me that freedom because I was born in a Senegalese family, very traditional, and I was the first generation born in France. So there were a lot of tradition. My parents really wanted us to fit into the Senegalese molds. They didn't want us to be French. So for 13 years, I had so many rules. We couldn't speak French at home. We couldn't sleep over at friends' places. So it was really, for me, I had no freedom at home. And being for a year in a rehabilitation center gave me that. And if I would not be where I am today without that 1 year, which was awful if you think about it, right? Being 14 and being on a bed for 6 months. But for me, it was the best thing ever.
Oh, your perspective on the world is so eye-opening, right? Because so many people would say a year in a rehabilitation center, surely that is the complete opposite of freedom, right? Surely
right.
It's the total opposite of freedom to be strapped to a wheelie bed. So I love, thank you for sharing, because we can look, there's a lot of kind of comparative despair out there, and we can look at people doing amazing things and having great results. And often we don't hear some of these stories, and it's not sharing it for sad perspective. I'm always interested from like, how do you look at the world such that you were in that situation and it's now like a nothing to you? And so when you're saying it and you're like, it was my freedom, I'm like, really?
it's funny because even when I remember the memories of being in that center, I feel like I was flying. But then no, I was lying on the bed. But my memories just kept the freedom part and the joy of running around and having friends, well, wheeling around and having friends. So I really kept very, very good souvenirs.
Oh, wow. Darling, what is it that you think, Fatou? What do you think makes a woman powerful?
I think it is those lows. I think having lows make you powerful because it gives you the resilience. It gives you another way to look at the world. Because if you only have an amazing life, it's hard for you to understand other people, first of all, and being able to be empathic. Because I think having empathy is super important to being strong because it's giving you that ability to put yourself in other people's shoes. Mm-hmm. And that's power for me. Like when I look at all the people that I admire, the Nelson Mandela, Rosa Parks, their fight was not about themselves. It was about other people. It's about understanding that someone has to stand up for others, and you can do it because you have the power, because you understand what it feels to be in other people's shoes and what is the worst that can happen for those other people.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. I'm going to ask you like a really, well, how am I going to say? Probably a bit of a mean question, but it's okay because I ask everybody the same mean question.
All right, shoot.
and my mean question is all of that stuff, like your 600,000 lifetimes and your fresh perspective and the ups and the downs and all of that. Like if you were to boil it down to 3 things that you would say, these are the things that make me who I am. These are the things that have contributed the most to my life success and my business success. I call them your power tools, your techniques, your strategies, your ways of being that are really like fundamentally, if it were not for these things, I would be a different person. So I kind of want you to share what your 3, I said it was a mean question. I did.
Yes.
I would love you to,
question.
It is a mean question. I'd love you to share your 3. So we'll just start with the first one. What would you be the first like power tool?
When I was young, I remember one thing for the first 10, 12 years of my life was I used to read a lot. Books for me were super important because I was stuck at home most of the time. So the only place we were allowed to go was a library. So we could just borrow books and read all day. So I can't tell you how many books I've read, but it's ridiculous. And what those books gave me is dreams. So I would read about stories of people traveling to other countries, riding horses, skiing, because I didn't like TV and Netflix was not yet a real thing, right? It was more about the books. So I could just picture anything. So I think dreaming is my first power tool. For me, that is so important because if I didn't dream about freedom, if I didn't dream about traveling, I would not have been to Singapore and traveled 51 countries. So dreaming for me is important. And also you need to dream to be able to predict the future. You need to have that ability to project yourself to a place where you haven't been yet, which might not even exist, but you have the power to create. So dream, that's number 1.
Project your, girl, you got tweetables in there and all. I'm listening to that and I'm like, ooh. So it's like projecting yourself into like dream so you have somewhere to project yourself to.
Yes, it's exactly that.
And I think as women, we really, especially for those of us who may be in one of those times where it just feels like things aren't working and they're stuck. The irony is the more you think about the crap, the worse it gets. Like,
of course, manifestation, right? You manifest bad things happen to you.
It's like, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. But all the universe hears is what you don't want. Like you kind of got to put some more new stuff in. So it's a really beautiful reminder to people. Like we all have those moments where it could be different. We want it different. I mean, even when it's great, we're entrepreneurs, we want more. But if we keep focusing on this is missing and this is missing, you know what? You never get to appreciate the beauty of what's here right now. So I love that idea of like, let's look forward and project ourselves forward into something more exciting. At least we can take 5 minutes a day and live in our delusions. That sounds like fun.
Yes, it's super important. Like every morning, what's your dream for today? What's your intention? What do you want to achieve for tomorrow, for your kids?
Oh, beautiful. And what is your tool number 2?
Number two, that goes after dreaming, because it's amazing to dream, right? But you won't achieve anything if you don't dare. So number two will be dare. Just jump. Just do it. Why stand at the top of the mountain and look at the bottom? Just, take a parachute and jump.
Oh,
And
because I'm not prepared for two. Don't make me jump.
you're never going to be prepared enough. And that's the thing. When I moved to Australia, I had literally no money. I had one friend, and I had no plans because it was so sudden. And so literally, I had no parachute. But I was daring enough to just try. And my thought was, what's the worst that can happen, right? After a couple of months, I will run out of money and maybe I have to go back to my parents. Well, that's awful, I know, but that was the worst. But then what's the best that can happen? I could end up being the head of trade, working at a 28th floor of an amazing glass building, have amazing colleagues, and have that amazing life that I always dreamed about. Have that apartment overlooking Sydney Harbour. That was the biggest dream ever. But then I dare just ask everyone around me, do you know how I can get that apartment at that price? And I got the apartment. So being daring enough is super important. And we need more women to be daring. I know sometimes people don't expect you where you will go, but if you don't take the risk, for sure you'll never get it. And one friend always told me is, the commonality between everybody that's won the lotto, that became a millionaire by winning the lotto. The main thing between all those people, they all played, they all dared to try. So how about you? Just dare.
I love what you're saying there. I spoke to, I think it's the interview just before this with Michelle Raymond, and she talks about this idea of, we wrapped it up with this idea of not leaving footprints, but actually not tiptoeing through life, but actually leaving footprints and leaving a mark. And sometimes it's finding the courage to keep going.
Yes.
Because you can dare for a moment and then you get cold feet. You're like, oh, like I'm in Australia, it's been 2 months, it's been 3 weeks and I have no job. Go home.
Right. Exactly. Just give up.
But you can be so close. There's this beautiful, I'm sure many of the people listening have heard this. You know which image I'm talking about? There's
yes.
two people and they're in like the mine and they're like chipping away at the mine. And they're both like inches away from coming through. And one of them you see turning around and going back and the other one is still chipping. And I actually put a post today on my Facebook page that just said, the reality is business is difficult. Like, business, nothing in business, everything in, I think it's something like everything in business takes longer than you think it's going to take. Like it always takes longer. It always takes longer. It's always that little bit more complicated. It's always going to be a journey. But so stop looking for the magic pill because it doesn't exist. Maybe direct your energy to consistency, even when it doesn't count. I know for me, when it's come to finding speaking engagements, I've had engagements that have come just on that last email that I'd sent out. It was like 3 reminders, 4 reminders, 5 reminders, bam, and it's just that bit of kind of going, it feels like nothing's happening, but there's a lot of energy, for want of a better word, going out to the universe that says, I'm still open for business, boo. Like, I don't know why you seem to think I'm kidding. I'm actually quite serious. So I'm going to keep showing up until you show up too. Like, help me out here. But often we give up on ourselves way before anybody else has.
So true. So we shouldn't just keep going. Be resilient.
Resilience. Dare to be out there.
Yeah, dare to be out there. But I think one thing that can help you in that case is the connections, the people around you. And that brings me to my
third one.
Tool number 3. Yeah, exactly. Which is thrive together. I'm a true believer that we will succeed collaborating if we do it together. You can't do anything by yourself. And of course, it's hard to dare. But then when you have a whole community around you that can help you in your down moments, that's how we will all succeed. And we have to all hold our hands so that we can all reach the top together. You can't just leave one behind. You have to take everybody that is willing to come.
So I think that's important. Here's my big question for you then. What type of people should we be having around us? Because I know I had some folk when I started, I ain't gonna mention no names just in case they be listening. I had some folk when I started, and I can give you an example. Actually, when I started emceeing, I found a professional MC. I was like, frick, there's one of them on Twitter. Met them for coffee. And this person goes on to tell me nobody makes any major money emceeing. It's mainly like, here's how the industry is. And I remember sitting there thinking, girl, it wasn't even a girl, it was a guy. I remember sitting there thinking, that might be your world, but I don't really want to subscribe to
Nope, not for me.
what you're selling. I don't want to buy. So I'm going to go find somebody who might be a little bit more aligned to what it is I want to buy into, because I would have changed my business model entirely if I'd have bought into it. I would be doing a volume-based business, really low paid. I honestly would not have been stretching quite as far as I can do. Fast forward several years and I meet somebody who's like, oh yeah, you know, you could be making lots more emceeing. And, you know, she speaks, she's emceeing, and she's got those kind of tangible examples. And, you know, the same way that you'll have people say at any time, it's really difficult to buy a property. You'll find somebody else who tells you now's the best time to buy a property because they've been there and done it. So for you, what makes, you know, this thriving together? Can you give me some more insight on what that looks like and what that means in your world? Because it's not just, in my experience, it hasn't just been like, get people around you.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point what you're saying, and we do have that same kind of issue. So the way the Great Village, my company, works is based on barter. So everybody exchange a resource that could be a skill, a tool, a connection, or just time to test a product of one of the entrepreneurs in the community. So the whole mission of the Great Village is to help build new companies. So because we believe that entrepreneurship and impact-driven entrepreneurship can create tomorrow. So what we're doing is we meet people and we tell them, well, this is how it works. Do you have something that you want to give? Because you have to give before receiving in the Great Village, which is actually how life is, right? If you don't give, you never receive. So we tell people, well, what do you want to give? And literally, you will have a split happening there. You have the one that believe in giving and the rest of the people. So the rest, we literally don't have time for you. I'm sorry. The day you're ready, just come. But in the meantime, we will focus on the one that have the same values and have the same objective. And those people actually are the one growing the fastest. Those are the entrepreneurs that are exploding because they've been giving to the community, but what the community give them back is 3 times bigger. So for example, we did an event and we needed champagne. So we went to see an ethical champagne producer and we asked her, we contacted 3. One said yes, she said, yes, I'm happy to give you 6 bottles. So she came to our event and she brought the best bottles she had. You know, she didn't go on the cheap side, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to give them the $5 champagne shits. No. She came with proper, amazing bottles. At the end of the night, so she had shared about her story, her company. At the end, she had 3 orders for her champagne. So she basically made way more money than what she gave, but also her name, her notoriety, and people send her people at her shop. So there is a real value in finding your tribe, because that tribe will attract more people that, you know, like your vibe attracts your tribe. So you keep growing your tribe with people that have the same vibe. And for us, it's all about great vibes.
All about the vibes. There's so much in what you just said that, I mean, I love the fact that your business is fundamentally built on a principle that you live by. Like, I mean, that's just so cool. Like the business you're running right now is like fundamentally built on a principle that you live on. And I think it speaks volumes in terms of how business and networking is done nowadays. There's a lot of push energy, I find. And sometimes with women, we have a challenge with finding that balance between helping where we're just giving and giving and giving, and being able to have that be reciprocal. So I'm going to segue into some, like, because now you got me curious about more about the Great Village and how that works. So how does that receptacle vibe work with the Great Village? Because I think it will give our listeners an opportunity to perhaps think a little bit differently, or enhance, or maybe just tick a couple of boxes for them where they're like, girl, I got my networking game down. But how does that work where you're bartering? Because it can be a system where it can feel like one's outweighing the other. So I love the idea that actually, in order to get involved, first you got to give. First you got to give before you can take. But what other principles, like how does it work?
So to help with that, like bartering, we created a currency called the Great Vibe. So every time you share something with the community, you receive a number of great vibes, which is amazing. Like it's a currency. And then you can use those great vibes to get access to a resource you need. For example, I'm creating a new ethical fashion line, and the first thing I need is a logo, maybe a front page on a website. You get on the Great Village website, on the platform, you share what you need, but before being able to unlock any help, you have to yourself give. And
you have to be able to, you have to generate some good vibes.
Some great vibes, exactly.
Some great vibes.
So to get the great vibes, maybe you have an office and you have 2 extra desks that you're not using. So how about you offer those 2 extra desks to an entrepreneur from the community that has a project that's maybe complementary to yours, maybe to yours, maybe they do shoes, designing shoes, I don't know. And in exchange of that, you get a number of great vibes, and then you can use them to get access to a designer that's going to design your logo. That's as simple as this. So it's basically going back to life in a village, back in the days, when you had apples, I have avocado, giving you apples, you give me avocados. Done. Nobody cares how much it's worth, an avocado or an apple. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with the Great Village. We don't want our currency, the Great Vibe, to be indexed on the euro, the pound, because basically it will be the same thing. How about creating a new world that is the same? Useless. So what we're trying to do is index it to the price of trees or water or the carbon, something that has a real meaning, that is meaningful for all humans, because the Great Village at the end is all about human and humanity.
You are so inspiring. I'm going to be honest, what I'm loving is just how much you've put your values into your business. And I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the doing that this, it's really inspirational to have you here talking about how you've intertwined your values truly into the business that you're creating, not in a tag on way, but to truly integrate it. And I think it's just the nature of who you are as a person. I say I think it there's a lot to do with the nature of who you are as a person and your ability to kind of look like naturally just look greater than yourself. And there's a huge amount to be said for that. Thank you so much for sharing today. I'm girl, I feel like I need to up my game.
Thank you very much, Lovelda. Thank you very much for having me. I think it's super important to be the incarnation of your business, and you are the incarnation of your business.
People who want to connect with you and they're hearing about Great Vibes and they're like, okay, right, I like the Great Village, I need to hear more about that. I'm telling you, the links are also in the show notes. So wherever you're watching, we've dropped all of the links in there. But just for ease, if somebody's like, oh, I need to go now, what is it?
So just go on www.thegreatvillage.co, or just find us on LinkedIn at The Great Village.
Super. Juiciness. So inspiring. And I'm going to have you help me wrap this show up. What would be your closing words? What do you want to leave people with today?
So I'm going to invite you to dream big, to dare greatly, so we can all thrive together.
Ladies, you heard it here first. Maybe it was second, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first to my ears, so it's first to yours. So if you have been hiding under the shadows, if you've been scared to take action, and if you've been doing it by yourself, now is the time for you to maybe reconsider that. You've been listening to The Lovelda Show, Women of Power podcast. If you have not already, click that subscribe button. Believe me, there is so much more where this comes from. Please do also hop across and leave us a 5-star review. We listen to, listen to all your comments and that sort of stuff. So do comment, share, get other ladies who need to hear this stuff, hearing exactly what's going on. In the meantime, please go out, shine your light big on the world, dare big, and don't forget, there are others out there who are willing to help you. So please just let them.